If I gave a fuck what y'all think I would be doing this? Welcome to the FMFU podcast, the podcast that's from me, for us. Vulgar but true, real and never fake. I'm your host, Reese, and I've got a lot of shit on my mind today, so let's get into it. Happy Friday, people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the podcast that's from me and for us. You know, I was just telling myself the other day that it feels like it's been a while since I put out an FMFU episode for you all, but at the same time, looking back at my calendar, I've come to the conclusion that May was a busy fucking month for me. I told you about my weekend in Cleveland and the whole fiasco and issues I had coming back home from the airport. I had some birthday parties to attend, plenty of errands to run, lots of playoff basketball to watch, and last week, a big group of us took a trip down to Orlando with all of the kids. Talk about exhausting, right? But I had fun in Orlando, as it was a good time. I was able to catch up with some friends I haven't seen in over a year, and I think it was a good way to end May and start the summer off right into June. When we planned our trip with our group, we decided to go to SeaWorld, and they also have a water park down there called Aquatica. I decided to do that because, realistically, a nigga like me, I was not trying to do no Disney. I figured that, my kid's only 3 years old, and that shit costs too fucking much to spend money on non-memorable memories. So if I'm going to decide to do that, we need to make those House of Mouse memories last forever. But despite that, though, the parks were fun. As you know, there were lots of stuff for the kids to see. Had lots of water rides to enjoy over at Aquatica. And I think the thing I just appreciated most was the fact that I got out of the congested and cloudy air of New England and I was able to be in the open, sunny, warm weather. I will say this, though. After spending all day in the sun at SeaWorld and Aquatica the following day, I can say that I am officially a part of Team Brown Skin for the summer. Okay, maybe not. But I did get a crazy tan, and shittingly enough, my damn shoulders got burnt. So, yeah, busy month of May leading into June, and even despite the fact of me being busy, I think there might have even been a week in between these episodes where I don't really think there was shit going on like that. There just wasn't anything going on that was really relevant to talk about, with the exception of basketball, which I don't really cover too many sports like that. I leave that up to the other podcasts. But I will say this. All of that changed last week, especially after Friday, May 25th, when Daytona dropped. Ugh. As I said, because of my schedule and being that I was leaving out of town last Thursday, it was so much tea brewing up in a short 48-hour span last week that I had decided to link up with my boys over on the No Rules podcast for our third collaboration. So, if you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard it yet, head on over and listen to that episode that dropped last week titled Drizzy's Got a Baby. We covered the whole Pusha and Drake situation, which I think a lot of things that were talked about on there will be relevant to some of my points today. And we also covered other shit besides that as well. So if you haven't yet, go over there and listen to that. Then come back and holla at me. And that's the No Rules podcast. That's over on iTunes, Apple Music, and also on SoundCloud. Make sure you subscribe and rate as well. Moving on, as you should know by now, Pusha T, Young Money. Been beefing for over 10 years. And I'd say more so recently in the 2010s is when Drake decided to, shoot his shots at Pusha T on behalf of Lil Wayne. But despite the fact of being a hip-hop junkie, feeling that he needs to reply, Drake probably isn't going to reply to Pusha's most recently released The Story of Adidon. It's been over a week now, and we haven't gotten anything as far as a reply. So I think we can conclude that This battle was over with Pusha winning the series 4-2. I had Drake up 2-1 after the Duppy freestyle, especially because of how quickly it was put out. I mean, this nigga put the shit out in like fucking 6 hours. I thought it was ridiculous. But after the story of Adidon dropped, I gave Push 2 wins for that. And then with Drake not replying, that just means Pusha claimed the last win by default. So that puts us at a 4-2 victory. For Push, this is great for him. Well, why is that? Well, think about it. It happened right around when his album dropped. Can we even call it an album? I mean, I listened to his Breakfast Club interview, and I guess they said that it goes by length when determining something to be eligible for a Grammy. But I mean, I'm like, damn, 7 tracks, my nigga. But anyway, I'm sure, the beef jumped his streams up of his album massively. And you even got to think about it this way. Pusha and Drake with this beef even made it into white people news. Now, when you make it into white people news as a 41-year-old rapper still rocking braids, you know you won something at least a little bit. Drake has lost his battle to Pusha T, and that's how it goes. I know some people are probably taken aback by me personally saying that for a few reasons. Well, for those who know me and listen to this podcast on the regular, I'm sure you have known for me to say in a past episode, or maybe a couple episodes, that Drake is an artist in one of those categories who doesn't take a loss. Despite losing this battle with Pusha, I still feel that way. So, I mean, how you still feel that way, Reese? I mean, you just said he lost to Pusha, so how don't he take a loss, my nigga? Like, you sound goofy and you going back and forth and saying shit. Like, that shit don't make sense, my nigga. Shut the fuck up and let me explain. So, when I say Drake, I'll even use a couple other examples. Jay-Z, Nicki Minaj. When I say people like that don't take a loss, what I'm more so referring to is referring to the fame part of being a hip-hop artist. Well, what does this mean? Well, let's look at all 3 of these artists' situations. All 3 of these artists I just named have been burnt, clapped, clipped, whatever you want to call it, by another artist. And the public community has deemed that they lost. They didn't win their beefs. Hov was clapped by Nas. Nicki got clapped by Remy. And more recently, Drake was clapped by Pusha T. But let's examine what these L's have done to their careers compared to the people who have bested them in a beef. Let's go back to the oldest one, Jay-Z and Nas. Now, Nas is always going to be considered a legend because of his influence on the game and the dropping of his classic Illmatic album back in 94 and just the era of hip-hop in which he's come under. His diss to Jay-Z, Ether, which came off of 2001 Stillmatic, Ether was so fucking ruthless, that shit went from not just a song title, but actually to a verb within itself. But more recently, in us, as I always say, living in a what have you done for me lately society, we can't really say Nas is still putting out super hot bangers. We know Nas got bars and is an OG spitter, but he hasn't been able to have that same influence as he did back in the day like Hov still has today, even though most agreed he beat Hov in the battle. Now, I am looking forward to that 7-track album that's supposed to be dropping next week, totally produced by Kanye. So hopefully it is fire for sure, because I want all good music. Pun intended, I guess. So to continue with my point, I can say that Remy hasn't really been super relevant since Lean Back or Conceited, which if you do the math and think about when that shit came out, that was over 12 plus years ago. Now, I understand everything that happened with her going to jail and how that can mess up things for your career. But to me, sometimes that shit boils down to the choices you make in life, not necessarily about what you're found guilty of. Sometimes you just got to find ways to move to keep yourself out of situations that can possibly occur. Let's just think about Jay-Z. Imagine if Jay-Z went to jail in 1999 for stabbing Lance Rivera when they said he was bootlegging copies of Volume 3, Life and Times of Sean Carter. Man, there'd probably be no Dynasty. There'd be no Blueprint. There'd probably be no Blueprint 2. All this shit would just derailed his career. Like, we would have been missing out on all these fucking classics because his ass would have been in jail. So, sometimes as in Remy's case, you just roll an unlucky number. Plus, like J.O.O.D said, in 5 years you're going to be on Love and Hip Hop. Now, Cole wasn't dissing Remy with that line, but he makes it to drive his point across that when you aren't relevant as an artist, that's where you end up. Look at Cardi Barty. Soon as she blew up, she chucked them deuces to Love and Hip Hop. Quick. I think without saying too much, the same can be said about Push. Always had the respect of being a spitter, but not always the best hit maker. Drake's fame is so fucking high that, if you really think about it, he's the reason that Pusha made it to white people news. Maybe that's one reason why Drake has decided not to say anything, because he knows he would only help him even if he does reply. Because we all know if Pusha was beefing with, let's say Kodak Black, that shit wouldn't have made it to white people news. I think sometimes there's certain similarities of things like that, because you have a lot of people in the urban millennial community, and I've seen a lot of people on my timeline that'll sit up here and be like, oh yeah, I've been a super Pusha T fan and yada yada yada, and they're not. You know, the last shit they really listened to of his was Lord Willing when he came out with the Clips. Now, my point to all this, not to get on a long tangent, is this isn't to diss those three artists who won their rap beefs, but I guess it's just to bring up the point that the three that lost, they're still going strong, and I don't see them ever falling off. The only person who really, quote unquote, killed somebody's career in a sense, I'd say was 50 Cent when he shitted on Ja Rule. He pretty much effectively made us start looking at Ja Rule differently. Like, when 50 was going to Ja, he made lots of people turn their backs on Ja. Even when he was at the top with all those smash mega hits he has. Now, this is not to say that, you know, we don't appreciate that music and those hits from back in the day today, because in a sense, Ja Rule was like Drake before Drake was Drake. I mean, really think about it. But when 50 came on the scene, there was a point where he killed that nigga shit, and we were all out here just screaming, G-Unit, and not fucking with Murder Inc. no more. So, the artistry which creates the fame is what matters most, because why? Well, musically, you have to continuously do something that people like to become famous and stay relevant in the limelight. And that's the most important, because fame equals fortune. And as T.I. said, no matter what no one says, life is ABM. And ABM is all about the money. Outside of the actual art of rap itself, I think this Pusha Drake beef brought into light other topics that should be discussed. We know in the story of Adidon that Pusha said he put in a ghostwrite and talk aside and basically just blasted Drake for allegedly knocking up a porn star and having a son that no one knows about. In hip-hop, anything goes in the war of verbal sparring. And as I said, I gave Pusha 2 wins for this diss track because I really liked it. I enjoyed it. But if we really sit back and look at it, what was really said in the track that wasn't already known or somewhat put out there? TMZ had reported over a year ago about this rumor floating around about this secret son and how Drake was on dates with the chick, Sophie B or whatever her name is. Why would TMZ put the shit out, at least in this instance, because TMZ has blasted a lot of people. Think of, you know, not Antonio Brown. Fuck, the running back that used to play for the Ravens, man. I can't think of his fucking name. The one that knocked his fiance in the head on the elevator and she fell out. Like, in the NFL, basically didn't have the scoop, but TMZ had it. Yeah, well, I guess that's a camera, so that's a little different. But anyway, TMZ is usually not too far off. So I guess my question is, why was that shit ignored or deemed false when TMZ brings it up? But, you know, when it gets put on wax in a rap song, we just take it, run with it, and deem it 100% true. Like, what changes the context of that? I guess, personally, for myself, I'm just going to assume it's because of the way something is delivered instead of what is actually being said. I've always said, and this has kind of been a mantra of mine, that it isn't about what you say, but how you say it. And I think this is the prime example of that. Despite the fact that Pusha put it out, let's look at the scenario this way. Let's say Drake didn't want to announce to the world that he had a son yet. Take the beef out of the equation, and let's just say he wanted to announce it in his own way. Is that really an issue? I think Chris Brown, I don't think he found out about his daughter until maybe like a year, maybe longer than that later after she was born. And as soon as he found out, he's done the right thing by his daughter. So I guess as the public people, who are we to say that Drake owes us, the nosy people of America, an answer to what goes on in his private life? Technically, and like I said, keep this all rap beef aside, it's none of our business on what he does in his personal life as long as he does right by the boy if the boy is really his son. Too many people feel that with social media that we have a right to know exactly everything that goes on in these celebrities' lives, and we treat them like they're just not normal people, which in a sense they aren't because they are megastars, but people are still human beings. We should feel we only have to know, I'd say, what they choose to share with us. You can't really criticize somebody for not tweeting something that's going on or sharing an image of something that's going on if they want to keep it privately. I can imagine for myself being super famous, and a lot of times I have to run to the store and grab things, and I could imagine if I'm just not able to go grab something to cook for dinner at the store because I got all these people following me just to look at me, get a glance, and just be able to take a pic to post on their fucking social media sites. I mean, that shit would fucking suck, and I'd probably go crazy. And I kind of more so relate with Eminem when he created the song The Way I Am. Because, I'm like in fourth grade when that shit comes out, and I'm just like, okay, this is a dope song. Eminem is one of my favorite artists of all time. And, I don't really think about that shit. And you just think about it now as an adult. I'm like, man, like I couldn't go anywhere like without somebody just being around me, and that shit must suck. So I don't know, man. I guess that's just the way it is.
It's the FMFU podcast, bitch.
I saw a meme the other day that brought up another point, and you could clearly see it was from a person who was trying to be a super Drake stan, but as open-minded as I am, it did make my mind go. The meme basically said, what is worse? A black man wearing blackface for what he thought was a cause to bring awareness to the struggles of black actors, or a black man selling mad drugs and destroying his black community for financial gain? In theory, and rap beef aside, I think it was actually something to think about. In my personal opinion, and probably yours too, I feel that in no way, shape, or form, anyone should ever wear any blackface, even if you are a dark-skinned black person. I just think this is due to the fact based on, what is represented in the past. It's just something that I don't think anybody should touch, ever. So, I did read Drake's statement on it that he put out, and as I always try to be, I always try to understand and see different point of views. And I get what he was trying to say or whatever, and what he was trying to do to show the struggles of, black actors back in 2007 or whatever. I get that. However, this is some shit that just falls in the category of it's either hit or miss. And this shit clearly missed the motherfucking mark. Especially with the way the internet is nowadays and how quickly, if some shit gets found, yo ass gonna get chopped the fuck up. But everyone makes mistakes, even when trying to do what they think is a good thing. And, I mean, that's fine, but you just gotta take that loss, bro. Don't use no fucking blackface. I also think another point the meme brought up as far as saying you're selling drugs to the black community and destroying it for financial gain, I think that kind of got glossed over. Because if you really think about it, we as a society, we do seem to glorify all of the dope dealers and all of the dope boys and just think that, it's okay. Think about what a lot of the OG rappers or fans of old school hip hop always say. We didn't rap about using drugs like these new age rappers. We rapped about selling drugs. Now, for the person itself saying that's saying they rapped about selling drugs, I mean, okay, yeah, for you, it's better to sell crack cocaine than to be a user of crack cocaine. Because who wants to be a fucking crackhead junkie, right? So, hindsight, it makes sense. But on the flip side, we as a black community, we are in a sense enabling and destroying our communities by partaking and glorifying the activity of selling dope. It brings a perception of certain type of people based on how we look or even how we dress. I used to have a Jeep Grand Cherokee on 22s. You know how many times I used to get pulled over? All the fucking time. And they couldn't find anything. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't violating any laws. They just assumed I was out here selling dope because I was young and was black and my hat was real low. Now, some of the old stories in these rap songs are relevant to talk if you have a story to tell, because one of my favorite interviews with Cameron, and he did this with Bill O'Reilly back in the day. I think it was in like '06. And Cameron basically said, I rap about drugs because that's what's going on in my community. I'm sort of like a news reporter or someone reporting the Channel 5 news on what's going on. I always agreed with that because I felt like that people used to always try to take rap and turn it into something that is bad for younger kids in a sense. And I'm always being a big defender of hip hop. And I think that a lot of times it starts with the parents. So when he said that, it made sense to me. I'm like, if you think about the news only reports bad stuff. Oh, a lady was murdered while she was pregnant on the west side. Oh, these was 2 gun shootings over here. So in my head, I'm just like, well, what's the difference between a rapper telling their story of what they used to go through? So looking at it that way, I think it makes sense to tell your story, especially when it's something you've been through, or if you felt that, you want to get it off your chest, if you happen to be, influenced to get into the game or some shit like that by your parents, or, if you truly were in poverty or poor and you felt that you had no other choice but to do something like that to take care of your family. I think that's all fine. Everybody goes through different struggles. But I think eventually it should be to a point where you aren't necessarily talking about selling bricks and 2 for $5 purple tops and shit, because you getting rap money now, especially as time goes on. Like, I wish this nigga Jay-Z would still talk about bricks with his 3-kid Beyonce married to ass. I think my issue just boils down to the glorification of it and only wanting to be about that one thing. Because only being about that shit, it doesn't get you anywhere. There's some rappers who made it, but that's a few far in between. A lot of the people I know who were involved with shit like that, they either fucking dead or they in jail. And a lot of people are related to me. So I think this is more so even to myself why I can't listen to as much trap music as I used to, let's say, back in high school. Because I'm not really surrounded around too many people that's around that shit or deals with that bullshit anymore. And I'm older now. I've grown up. So, sure, it's cool to still listen to trap music to get you hyped for the club or put you in a certain mood or some shit. But I think as you get older, it's time for us to move on to new things. In a way of moving on, I moved on from Good Music's first album of Pusha T's Daytona, which was a home run, to Kanye's new album, Ye. Another 7-song album. And I will say this. First listen, I wasn't really sold. I wasn't really sure if it was just me because, I'd seen like mixed reviews on it. I saw like somebody say, oh, the shit was just straight fucking trash. Then I had somebody say, oh, Good Music doing their thing. So far they 2 for 2. So I was kind of like torn. So I'm like, okay, well, one person said it sucks. Another person says it's good. Let me do my normal little listening ritual and see what my conclusion is. So typically when I listen to an album, when it just drops, I think I like to give it about, a week of listening and, give myself some time to let this shit marinate in my head, make sure I'm actually paying attention. And I also got to make sure that I listen to the album at least one time in my beats. Sometimes listening to shit in your headphones, especially when you got some studio beats or whether you got JBLs or something, some shit like that really, for music, you kind of hear a lot more of the production based on just listening to some fucking Apple earbuds. So I always got to make that final call about after I listen to that. And then that usually is what will bring me to my conclusion. So with this album being so short, I think it's easier to listen to it multiple times compared to something like, I don't know, Shrimp Life 3 or anything else that recently dropped. It's going to take a little longer to listen to that multiple times throughout the week. So I can sit here and say after about a week of listening to it, especially after finally listening through the beats, I got to say that I'm sold. As much as I think I wanted to dislike it because of everything that has happened recently, I can't truthfully sit here and say that I don't like the album. The shit got fucking bangers on it, man. Like, I think the best way to look at it is pick your top 3 songs off of The Life of Pablo and then maybe your top 3 off of the Yeezus album. And basically that is what the Ye album feels like. You got features from Ty Dolla $ign, Jeremiah, Party Next Door, and even Charlie Wilson. A lot of the shit's uncredited, but if you really know your artist, you can listen and you can tell that that's them on the tracks singing. So it's 7 tracks, kind of like Daytona. Out of the 7 tracks, I'd say I rock with about 5 of them for sure, and maybe Ghost Town, which is a 6 track, might make it 6 for me out of the 7 because they got fucking Cudi on the hook, man. And if you really a big Kid Cudi fan, you know, he always make them hooks better. Like, it's something about the way he I don't know, it's his delivery. Even though the motherfucker can't sing, I don't know what it is. Like, I mean, it's Cudi, man. You know, Mr. Solo Dolo, Soundtrack to My Life, Day and Night, Higher, Wildin' Cause I'm Young. All them fucking hits. Like, if you ain't really hip to any kind of Kid Cudi, you probably not gonna really rock with Ghost Town at all. So, oh yeah, speaking of Cudi, Ye and Cudi collab album. I need to give that shit a listen to whenever I get a chance. But going back to Ye, I think my favorite song on the album, at least that hits close to home to me, is probably the last track, which is Violent Crimes. And if you listen to the song, then I'm sure you probably know why I feel this way. So, Ye is solid. And despite me looking at this, just like I did Daytona, like, 7 songs, my nigga? Like, I'm gonna be real, man. I think this 7-song formula, I think this shit is gonna fuck around and be the new wave. Like, most people, you can think about it, after listening to a whole album, whether it be 12, 15, or 20 tracks, you probably only really like 7 to 9 of them joints on there anyways. So, if you put a complete album out with just 7 songs and the whole thing rocks, I think this might fuck around and be the new trend. Like, goddamn, this nigga Kanye always setting some fucking new trends. And I'm so serious. I think this might be what starts to happen. People start to put out little 7 or 8 track songs. And as long as the length is long enough to be considered for a Grammy, that's what people are going to do. Like, the EPs are probably going to die. It's going to all be 7 track albums. So, it's just crazy, man. But aside from the album itself, though, and even though I liked it, I still think this nigga Ye has some issues that need to be worked out. Like, you can tell through the public eye that Kanye just hasn't been the same for a while now. This whole going to Wyoming to record and have a listening session, it's just very strange to me. Now, I've never been to Wyoming. We know it ain't that many black people there. And there's nothing wrong with going there if it's like a nice resort or something. But I don't know. I feel like it's one of those just weird Kanye ideas. So it's just really strange. But and then also, too, what threw me off is that his wife said on Twitter that his album cover with the mountains or whatever was actually shot on his iPhone while on the way to the listening party itself. Speaking of iPhones, Apple said they're going to let us FaceTime 32 niggas starting this fall. 32 fucking people, bro. I don't even know 5 people I want to talk to at the same damn time on the fucking FaceTime. And you going to let me do up to 32? Shit. But anyways, yeah, and then on the front of the cover of the album, it says, you know, I hate being bipolar. It's awesome. This is where I said the issues are. I don't think anyone should glorify themselves being bipolar as having, in one of the songs he said, a superpower. And I also think that Kim should be held accountable for some of the actions as well. People probably like, well, what the fuck she got to do with this nigga? Well, I posted this on Facebook a long time ago, and I'm always talking shit, but it was something I said. I didn't get it from nowhere. It came right from me. And it went something like, and I quote, it said, your wife should be a representation of you, and if your wife a messy bitch, then that means your ass is messy too. Balls, nigga. But, no, in all seriousness, I think Kim enables Kanye. There are people in life who don't hold others accountable, and they make excuses for their actions, whether it's a parent with their child, a husband with his wife, or a wife with her husband. When you enable these actions and let this person do what they want, or in this case, say what they want, eventually that person is going to fly off the handle and say some or do some crazy shit. Hey, I heard Snoop Dogg's interview when he was on The Breakfast Club a couple weeks ago, and he pretty much said, like, Kanye has no black women in his life. If there was a black woman in his life, whether it is his wife or his mother, R.I.P., or even his auntie or somebody, they'd probably be checking his ass and putting him in place to help get him on the right track with things instead of just letting him do whatever he wants. You know, that's pretty much what the K-Clan crew does. Let they niggas do whatever they want, and then they go fucking wild. You know, I put it like this. I know if I was famous and I made some crazy comments or did some crazy shit, there's a few black women in my life who would have something to say about that, and they'd probably be knocking me upside the head to get some sense into me. So that's just something to think about. Put your brain to it. I was going to do a big tangent addressing some shit about, you know, the White House uninviting the Philadelphia Eagles for their Super Bowl win, but I decided not even to waste my long-winded breath on that fucktard in the White House because he doesn't fucking deserve it. However, I will just go on to say this. Fuck that orange guy because the kneeling isn't about him. And I want to say salute to the Eagles players who already planned on not going to that BS ceremony anyways. The only reason you guys were uninvited is because the picture was only going to be about 5 of y'all, and that asshole didn't want to be embarrassed. Salute to y'all. Let's keep on doing what we do. Thank you for listening to the FMFU podcast, the podcast that's from me and for us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, and comment, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Also, make sure you get at me on my social media pages. I have a Facebook page, which you can search for From Me For Us, or you can leave it in a status at FMFU_podcast. Also, get at me on Twitter and Instagram at the same @names. That's at FMFU_podcast. Remember, people, always keep it a buck, always keep it 1,000, and perception is everything. I hope you have a nice day. Still fuck y'all.